All right, so Matt, I heard that Alaska is full of reindeer ghosts.
Really?
Yeah, they said they have a ton of caribou.
Oh, Lord.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the graveyard. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Adam.
And my name's Matt.
Now, pull up a tombstone or settle into your casket and get comfortable because this is Graveyard Tales.
All right, everybody, here we are again. Matt, how you doing tonight, brother?
Man, I am doing great.
Good. Don't judge me by that joke. I was trying to find a good Christmas joke, and they were all terrible, and that's the best one I found. Sorry.
Yeah, it happens. You get some crappy ones.
Yeah, they're not all bangers, as the kids say. Before we get into it, though,
is that what they say?
They did at one point. I don't know what they say now. I now know what cooked means when they say what? I'm cooked.
Oh yeah. I hear that a lot.
Dude, me too. That's the only reason I know it. Michael's like, "Oh, I'm cooked," or he'll say, "Oh no, let me cook, bro. Let me cook." And so you got to figure out, context clues, what the heck they mean. But maybe this is what my parents felt like when I was like, "Cool, man. That's awesome." But I don't feel like our slang in the 90s was as crazy as the slang is now.
No, it's like another language.
It is. It is
a whole other language. I would imagine my parents thought the same thing.
I was talking to Michael's art teacher about that, and she's like, "Oh, I hear this stuff all the time. I gotta figure out what it means." She has to be more hip on it than I do.
I hear skibbity way more than I ever dreamed I would.
I didn't even know it was a word.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know it was a thing until Michael started doing the skibbity and skibbity toilet and
skibbity
all this
toilet.
Stuff. Have you seen the skibbity toilet at Walmart?
Oh, yes, I've seen it.
Okay. All right, good. I saw it. Michael wanted one. I said no.
Yeah.
I'm not. I ain't bringing that in my house. You brought the skibbity word in. We're not bringing in the toilet itself. Can't have the skibbity in the toilet too. Before we get into tonight's episode, we want to say go check out the Podbelly Network at podbelly.com. We're happy to be associated with the network and the shows there, and you can go on there and find some tips and tricks on podcasting if you want, and some shows that I promise you're going to like. Also, go check out our sponsors. We put the sponsor code in our show notes. So if you don't remember it from the ads, just go in our show notes, click the link. I hyperlink them all. So you can click the link. If there's a code, it's in the show notes as well. You can just click and go from there. Make it easy for you. Get you something. I mean, if you're shopping now for Christmas, you's in trouble because you only got, when this drops, you've got like 4 days. So, I mean, you better just go get it from a store if you're shopping now. But you can get yourself something for New Year's. You can get them a New Year's gift, something like that. Go check our sponsor links.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, go to patreon.com/graveyard tales. Sign up to become a patron. We've got 3 different levels, and some levels have audio and video ad-free versions. One level, our $10 level, you get our side quest shows, which we're recording a cool one tonight, which you will already have seen. By the time this episode comes out, you'll have already seen the side quest, so there's no point in me telling you what it is.
Yeah, unless you hear this and decide you want to go back.
That's a good point.
And subscribe and then catch it. So
right.
It'll still be there.
We live in a weird timeline, Matt and I do.
It's
because
like
of
a time warp.
How we record, when we record, and all this stuff. We're so confused half the time on what day it is. But I do want to say we are dropping this episode early. It is before Christmas, but this is our Christmas episode because Christmas falls on a Wednesday. So if you were going to get this, you'd either have to get it before or after. So this being our Christmas episode, if you want to listen to it on Christmas, just wait. Just pause right now, and then you can restart it on Christmas Eve. And on that note, Matt, what are we talking about tonight, brother?
Okay, so tonight is our annual Listener Stories Christmas show. And
done 8 of these.
Yeah, and the reason we do it like this is because of the old Victorian tradition of telling ghost stories around Christmas or on Christmas Eve.
Right.
It is a tradition that just it has changed and morphed over the centuries, and we're trying to kind of relive it a little bit.
Yep.
Okay. So I mean, the Christmas time, the end of the year, the winter solstice, these are all seen as times of transition, and it has long been a tradition of telling spooky stories in this time of darkness and transition and everything. So that's kind of where it stems, and we're bringing it back, and you guys are helping.
Yep, absolutely. And we try to, like Matt said, we try to do it every year. We've done one every Christmas, and there was one year we did one in the middle of the year, which I don't know why we decided to do that, but we did it.
I think we had so many people that wanted to be a part of it, but couldn't or didn't or whatever, or enjoyed it so much. We gave another opportunity kind of in the middle of the year.
Mm-hmm.
But this has been our thing for the last 7-8 years. So
yep. And I have to say, as I always say every year, thank you guys so much for sending in your stories, because not only do we get to read them on the episode and hear your story and then try to make some sense of it if you want. Some people ask for our opinion.
Yeah.
And so we freely give our opinion because that's all we do is talk. But also because we didn't have to research for this episode.
That's right. Yeah.
So thank you for giving us a break for the holidays.
Yeah, that's exactly
You have no idea how much the break is needed. We still get to record and put out an episode, but I didn't have to spend hours in front of this computer looking up minutia about the history and then going, oh, we don't need to say that after 2 hours of trying to find it. So, which is, it's my life nowadays.
The stuff that ends up getting cut.
Yeah.
Man.
Matt, before I get into this first one, I wanted to say, I kind of teased to you, I have a couple special encounters at the end of this episode. So stay tuned. Matt doesn't even know what they are. I didn't tell Matt that I was doing this. Nothing. So this is going to be a surprise for Matt as well.
All right.
Which I think he's going to like and appreciate, but y'all stick around for those as well. Now, as always, we make it a point, our first year or two, if you wanted us to give your name, we would give your name. And then we decided we're not going to do that. We're just going to give initials.
Mm-hmm.
So we will say the person's initials. And then if they want to come forward in the Facebook group or Twitter or whatever and say, hey, that was me who had that story, I am ABCJQ, then they can.
I'm the one who had the ghost come and getting in the shower with me.
Right. Right.
If you want to tell that.
Yep.
So be it.
So we'll give you their initials and then we'll do the stories like we have done for the past few years. So, Matt, this first one I got is from SL. And they say, not the most frightening, but definitely one which has stuck with me, and I've yet to find a good explanation for it. When I was around 10 years old, we had a substitute teacher cover our class while our regular teacher was on vacation. At the end of every day, she would give the class a complicated math puzzle as homework, which we'd review together first thing the next morning. These were pretty tough, but she said she wanted to give us a challenge. I had luck with a couple of them, some not so much, but I was a good student and always gave it my best shot. On the second to last day she was covering our class, she gave us another puzzle and mentioned that this one in particular was very tough and she'd be surprised if anyone got it, but to give it a go anyway. So that night, I tried and tried, but just couldn't work it out, so gave up, figuring I would find out the answer in the morning when we reviewed it in class. I went to bed that night and had a dream that I still remember to this day, some 30-odd years later. I dreamed that it was the next day in class and the substitute teacher was going over the homework puzzle. In the dream, having found that no one could work it out, she gave us the answer, drawing the solution on the chalkboard. When I woke up the next morning, I could remember everything so clearly, and before breakfast, I was easily able to write down the answer to the homework question based on the information from my dream. I went to school, kind of excited that I would have the answer. However, when I got to class, I stopped dead in my tracks because I immediately knew I'd been here in this moment before. This wasn't just like my dream, this was exactly the same. The substitute teacher was even wearing exactly the same clothes, which were not like anything she'd ever worn before. She gave the answer to the homework puzzle, writing it up on the chalkboard exactly like she had in my dream. I raised my hand to explain that I knew the answer from my dream the night before, but it was like she didn't hear me or couldn't see me raise my hand, almost like I was invisible. In a few minutes, when we moved on to our regular lessons, the feeling subsided. It then became like any other day, but I've never forgotten that experience. People have tried to explain it away, but haven't come up with anything that made sense. I genuinely believe that something overlapped or timeline shifted or something. To this day, I know something wasn't right.
Yeah. Something wasn't right.
Yep.
And I've had experiences like that too.
Yeah. Yep.
Where it's just, you're like, why do I know this?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's more than a deja vu. It's more than I've experienced this before. It's more of I have no reason to know the answers to this or to know this person's name or something specific about them.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, why do I know this?
Right. So it's like,
it's a weird feeling for sure.
Like you lived it before somehow.
Exactly. Okay. So my first one comes from AM. And AM says, here's my story about a flirty ghost in Colonial Williamsburg. My family, myself, husband, 2 tweens, and brother-in-law were visiting Colonial Williamsburg. And of course, we had to do a ghost tour.
Mm-hmm.
I've done several in different states and never experienced anything. This was my kids' first tour. We stuck to the back of the group so they didn't bother anyone if they had questions or walked too slowly. So we were leaving one area of the tour, and I was the very last person to walk off because I wanted to make sure my kids and brother-in-law, there's like a 40-year-old toddler. Okay. Calling him out. Making sure they were walking in the right direction. My husband was ahead of them. As I walked along, I feel someone or something grab my behind. It was so real that I immediately spun around to confront someone, but there was absolutely no one there. I thought, weird, but okay. And I kept walking. At the next stop, the tour guide told us about a ghost in the area that was a ladies' man in life and now in death likes to, quote, pester women. He told us several stories of how this has occurred. It was then that I realized that I had been harassed by a spirit. It wasn't scary, more funny, like, wow, all the ghost tours I've been on and never experienced anything, but this is what I get?
Yep.
Said, okay, Ghosty, of course my family doesn't believe me, but that's okay. I still have my flirty ghost story for anyone who wants to hear it. She's
There you
like,
go.
I'll take that over a scary experience any day.
Sure.
And we've heard a lot about, women, especially,
Mhm.
getting groped or something,
Yep.
from a spirit. But we've had a few that tend to like men.
Yep.
And,
The old South Pittsburgh Hospital. I
yeah,
can't get that out of my head. That,
But that's a good one. I mean, that's a good one. We believe you. So that if that counts for anything.
yeah, I mean, and it probably doesn't, but we do believe you. All right, so my next one is from RM. And this says, I have been sitting on this story for some time now, and I thought it was time to tell it. This happened in 2020, and a friend of mine and I went on a ghost tour in an abandoned county jail. I cannot remember any of the history of it, but the story starts down in the basement. To set the scene, the stairs to the basement are narrow and steep, and it is pitch black. Can't see the hand in front of your face dark. You walk down the stairs and immediately turn right. There is a room to your left and one right in front of you. Down here was where the interrogations would take place that were more of the physical side and numerous suicides. We walk into the room directly in front of us, and I already want to run back up the stairs. I lean against the wall as the paranormal people start to use a spirit box to communicate with whatever spirits are there, and almost instantly I can feel something watching me. I look toward the door, and I can feel my stomach turning in knots, and my body feels frozen in place. Whatever was just outside that doorway was angry and dark and evil and did not want me there. My legs felt like they were frozen in ice, and I started to shake. As the group finished up with the spirit box and our group went to move to the other room, I could not move. My friend, I'll call her Jay, tried to take my hand, but instantly drew her hand back and said my hand felt burning hot, but yet I felt cold. The paranormal people asked what was wrong, but when I tried to tell them, they acted like they didn't believe me. Suddenly, I hear a low growling in my ear, like something was right next to me, and took a deep breath and said out loud, I am not afraid of you. I felt my stomach twist.
Man.
Right? I felt my stomach twist even more, like I had been punched, and I doubled over in pain. It seemed to last forever, but I just kept repeating, I am not afraid of you, and suddenly the pain stopped and I could move again. I immediately left the room and headed up the stairs to sit down and collect myself. I lifted my shirt and saw red marks all across my stomach, and that terrified me. Eventually, we made our way to the top floor where there was a half basketball court and two more paranormal people with a spirit box. And again, I felt that sickening feeling in my stomach and looked in the dark corner and knew it was the same thing from the basement. As they were talking with the spirit box, I distinctly heard my name through the box, and no one but my friend knew my name, and I clearly heard, kill my name, kill my name. My legs once again felt frozen in place, and I could not move. It felt like something was squeezing my legs together tightly to the point of pain. I kept repeating in a quiet voice, I am not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of you. And the pain in my legs kept getting worse to the point my knees began to buckle. My friend put her hands on my shoulders and whispered along with me, I'm not afraid. And I could hear the growling again in my ear, but I stayed calm and kept saying it. Suddenly, a cool breeze whooshed by me. There were no windows in this room, and the pain in my legs was gone. My friend and I made our way down the stairs as fast as we could and sat down in the lobby area once again and headed outside for fresh air. We had brought sage with us and burned it as we walked back to my car, and as we were driving away, I looked up in the window and saw two red glowing eyes staring at me. When I got home that night and was getting ready for bed, I looked at my legs and saw very red, long finger-shaped marks on my calves, and they stayed there for days afterward. The building has since been closed due to the death of the owner, but I do still get curious sometimes what it was that was so angry at me for being there.
Yeah. You know, you do have to be careful when you're doing this kind of stuff. And I know that anytime I'm involved with something like this now, I mean, I know I didn't for years, but you always want to have some type of cleansing ritual that you would do,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because I can't say that I've ever experienced it, but I know we have talked to plenty of people that have had things follow them from wherever they were.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you don't want to leave a place like that with an attachment. That's for
Right.
sure. So.
Right. And that's one of the reasons why I wear black tourmaline all the time, is just in case. I mean, I've talked about the other reasons, but black tourmaline helps with keeping attachments off. So I don't go anywhere without my tourmaline.
Yep.
But
all right.
yeah, you
that was
you
a good
do
one.
need to be careful.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Gotta be. That's why we always say don't screw around with Ouija boards and all that
Right.
stuff. You know, it's hard enough to deal with it when you go into their space. There's no reason to invite them into yours.
Right. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So this one is from TL. And TL writes, "This story starts when I was young. I live in Eastern Kentucky and had listened to my parents and grandparents tell me and my brother many stories, but had never experienced anything myself. One day while at my grandparents', my brother and I were walking up the holler just killing time. I had an odd feeling, as if I was being watched, and turned to look behind me. There was a small cemetery high up on a cliff behind us. Standing at the edge of the cliff was a faceless figure in a white robe. It gave me an extremely uneasy feeling, so I told my brother to turn back, and we went back to the house. Now, I assumed this would be the end of the odd figure. However, every few years, I saw the figure again and again. Sometimes the figure had no face at all. Sometimes I could almost make out a pair of eyes, but always in the distance and always in graveyards.
It's creepy.
Fast forward to 2016, and my cousin had bought a home that had a graveyard behind the house. A few months after moving in, she called me freaking out. She said she had seen a white-robed figure with red eyes standing maybe 20 feet from her in the graveyard. She told me it smelled like death and terrified her. However, it never came any closer. Regardless, the sense of dread she said to have felt was intense. I moved away for around 8 years and never saw the figure again. I was finally out of the woods, it seemed. However, due to changing circumstances, I moved back home. I bought a house with, you guessed it, a graveyard as my backyard. Hey, now, how many houses just have graveyards behind them? Jeez.
Not many, but I guess you get in the right part of the country and you get them.
I suppose, you know, I'd be like, there's a graveyard back here? Yeah, pass. Show me the next one.
And I've seen this movie. I know better.
Mm-hmm. It says, just a few days ago, I was pulling in the driveway from work. We parked directly at the entrance to the old graveyard. It is the only feasible place to park and still have plenty of front yard. Lo and behold, in the middle of the graveyard, I see a robed figure with no face whatsoever. I froze for what seemed like decades. The sense of dread I felt from seeing my old quote-unquote friend again was unimaginable. I have no idea what this figure is, but there is no way it can be good. a supernatural debt collector, maybe. I quickly made my way inside and ignored the issue. I've not seen the figure anymore over the past couple of days, but who's to say this will be the last of this thing?
That's
what do
weird.
you think? What do you think this would be?
I don't know, because you think hooded figure that follows you around, you think something ominous, but
only in cemeteries or graveyards.
Yeah, I don't know. It could honestly be a protector guide.
Could, yeah.
You know,
I don't necessarily think it's anything all that ominous.
Yeah, because if it was, something would have happened already. I feel like.
Yeah. If it's been going on for this long, and you only see it in these graveyards, you've not ever seen it in your house or in your actual yard. You know, like maybe at some point when you didn't live with a graveyard in your backyard.
Mm-hmm.
Then I don't think it's anything ominous, and it may very well be, a spirit, or like you said, a protector, you know, of the dead.
Yeah, yeah.
It may not be the same thing you're seeing every time. You just may have a sensitivity that you see this, you know, that every graveyard you go to.
Right.
It seems like this one's following you, but it's just you're meeting the one that's for that one. And,
yeah.
And for whatever reason, you're sensitive enough that you actually see it.
Yep. And that's what I was thinking. It may not have anything to do with this person at all. You know, right. It's a protector or a spirit guide for those that have passed. Mm-hmm. And like you said, she is just tuned in to a sense where she sees it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I said they see it. We're using
I'm not
initials,
sure.
So
I said that just out of habit, but I don't recall.
Yeah. So they might just be tuned in enough to see it.
And let's see, it was what they said. It's a cousin. Yeah, a cousin saw it. So maybe there's a family connection, you know, or maybe your family has that ability or that sensitivity.
We've talked about familial lineage that are more apt to see aliens, more apt to see UFOs, more apt to see ghosts. There may be something genetic in there.
Yeah. I know that, you know, this may not be the best example because it's more of a negative, but banshees, when we discussed banshees, those spirits attach themselves to a family. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that maybe it is maybe it has something to do with ancestry or something. Who knows? But it's a really interesting story. I think the fact that you only see it in graveyards, it's not anything to be afraid of.
Right.
All right, Adam, we're going to talk about a new sponsor, and this is one of my favorites, Mint Mobile. Mm-hmm. And, you know, because I've got a dozen kids, well, 5, but it might as well be a dozen.
Might as well.
With the amount of money I have to spend on them.
Every time I say, the number goes up anyway. So.
That's right. You know, I turn around and one of them's got their hand out always. But, you know, when it came time, when my youngest daughter, when it came time for her to get a cell phone, oh, man, I was like, I'm shelling out so much money already.
Right.
Okay, so I was looking for a deal, and I got a deal, you know, or at least what I thought, you know, was a deal. And so I'm paying for her cell phone. Then I found Mint Mobile, and switching her phone to Mint Mobile has saved me $35 a month.
That's great.
I mean, that's unheard of.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people can say they're saving $35 a month on their mobile phone plan? Well, you can if you switch to Mint Mobile. And,
That's true.
You know, I mean, you know, it's so crazy. You know, we had years of contracts with all the fine print and all the extra fees and you know, there's always a catch. But with Mint Mobile, there wasn't a catch. So Mint Mobile's wireless plans are $15 a month.
That's
when
incredible.
When you purchase a 3-month plan. So I'm looking around going, all right, what's the catch? You know, this is, you know, it's going to be ridiculously, you know, I'm going to have extra fees. You know, the service is going to be terrible. But after investigating and talking to them, it all made sense. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they sell their wireless service online, so there is no catch.
Right.
They don't have retail stores or salespeople. Instead, they deliver premium phone plans directly to you.
And it really does save you a lot. You can say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages, because that's the other thing. You can just automatically get hit with an overage fee for no reason. And Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. Where else can you get that?
That's right.
You know, you just get the SIM and you keep your own phone. Yeah. Dude, that's the worst part about changing cell plans is I got to get a new phone, program everything else in there that I had on the old phone, and now I got to figure out this phone again. No, Not with Mint Mobile. You can ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. Now, to get this new customer offer and your new 3-month unlimited wireless plan for just $15 a month, all you need to do is go to mintmobile.com/grave, Grave. That's mintmobile.com/grave.
Yeah, cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/grave. $45 upfront payment required, which is equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on the first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
All right, so this next one is from Jay, and they wanted to preface it with this does involve discussing suicide. So if anybody is sensitive to that, they can move on. It says, it takes a little while for me to set the stage, but I promise it all comes together in the end. My story takes place starting in 2011 near a military base in Georgia. I was active duty military, and my wife and I had been married for approximately 4 years. We both had children from our previous relationships. Hers stayed with us and mine stayed with their mother in Texas. I had been stationed in the area for several years, but I was fixing to be deployed to the Persian Gulf region for my next duty station. I've got to jump in. I know they're from Texas because he said fixin' to.
We say it up here too.
That's true. But I saw fixin' to and I went, that's my kin right there. I feel I feel related to this person because you don't hear many people say fixin' to. Anyway, he says, my wife started her career on base and loved her job. So between that and the fact that I would be spending most of the next 3 years out of the country, we decided that I would go to my next duty station unaccompanied and my wife would buy a house since they're is a slim chance I would be able to return to the area in 3 years or so for my next duty assignment. My wife, being the wonderful and amazing person she is, found a beautiful home that was well within our price range and big enough to accommodate our whole family when my children visited. Spoiler alert, we think the house was haunted. So while I was at my next duty station doing workups for deployment, she purchased the home and got everything moved in and settled entirely without me. She even got the owners and realtors to speed up the process so I could step into our home during one of my visits home and before I was deployed again. But almost as soon as she completed moving in, our lives began to get more complicated. Several things don't seem to be connected, but bear with me. My wife's ex and his family had always been difficult to deal with. They lived in Washington State, but with me gone, they began a new round of making our lives miserable and not returning our daughter to in accordance with the court orders like they were supposed to. They violated the parenting agreement several times and forced my wife back into Washington court several times, costing us significant money in court and lawyer fees simply to enforce what was ordered by the courts. Add in that the father was consistently behind in child support. We suddenly found ourselves dealing with these costs on top of just buying a house, and I was now halfway around the world and unable to do anything to help my wife. The issue did get resolved, but before it was, I was notified that my enlistment contract was being torn up by the government and I was being forcibly discharged in less than a year due to a reduction in forces. The insult to injury was that I was told this as I was returning home right before the holiday season, so mid-November. We had time to plan, so while we were both terrified, we were hopeful everything would work out. However, during the next several months, the housing recession hit our area particularly hard, and we were basically told there was no way we could sell our house. Add in the military base entered into a hiring freeze during this time, so even though I would get preference in the hiring process and was qualified for many jobs that would normally be available, the largest employer in our area would not have a job for me when I was discharged. While this is going on, my wife's oldest, she was in her mid-teens, began to struggle with her mental and emotional health. She would later be diagnosed with severe depression and would have to be treated with medication and counseling. I was discharged in 2012, just prior to summer visitation with my 3 children. It was during this time that I began to see things around my house. Things would move in my peripheral vision, and I would see black shapes on top of furniture and fixtures that would almost immediately disappear when I tried to look at them. I didn't tell anyone because everyone already knew that I was struggling mentally, and I didn't want anyone thinking that I was officially crazy. It was also at this time my wife became pregnant with what would be the 6th child between us. I had enough benefits and savings that we were able to still have a decent summer with my children. However, I was not able to find any meaningful employment the entire summer. So even though I was happy to have my family together, I began to get stressed and become severely depressed myself. I did not start treatment because I didn't want the meds or anything to interfere with the summer visitation, as I was already losing time that was unproductive looking for a job. Time moved on. Things continued to get worse as my mental health declined and my desperation to find a job increased. The situation became so toxic that I began to be physically abusive to my family. It didn't help that I decided to pile on more stress and start going to college during this period and finally taking part-time work in fast food. Things only got worse. As shortly before my wife gave birth to our daughter, and after I got into legal trouble and ended up hospitalized for mental health treatment on multiple occasions. Slowly, over the course of the next 2 years, I got slightly better mentally, but all of my relationships deteriorated, and though the job market was getting better, I was unable to find meaningful work due to my legal troubles. Finally, in the spring of 2015, I resolved my legal issues and I was able to take a job offer in Austin, Texas that would be a significant step up in pay as well as getting me closer to my children and family that lived in East Texas. I started the job in Austin in the summer. Not sure if my wife would actually join me to start a new life in Austin. For the next couple of months, her physical and mental health deteriorated, but she did move to Austin with our baby and her younger daughter. We kept the house as the market was still ice cold and rented it out through a property management company. Our house was rented fairly quickly by a young couple, and the husband was on active duty. Due to the distance, we never established a relationship with them, simply let the property managers handle everything. To say that things instantly got better with my wife and I reunited in Austin wouldn't be entirely true. Things were rough and still had not fully completed treatment for my depression and other mental health issues. My wife was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis shortly after moving and talked with a doctor she worked with about some physical symptoms she was experiencing. It was during this time that our youngest daughter, who was now approximately 3, began talking about the girl. The girl was always in a corner of the room when my daughter saw her, and she was normally on top of something. The most consistent place our daughter said she was on top of the window blinds fixture in her room. I dismissed it initially as an imaginary friend, but the girl never interacted with her that I could tell and did not seem to be around consistently or at any specific time. My wife was worried and told me that she was afraid something had followed us from our house in Georgia. I laughed it off until my wife told me that every one of our kids had seen or experienced something in that house that worried or scared them. She never told me about it because she didn't want me worrying about anything else while I was sick and dealing with all the problems that I was having at the time. It was during this conversation that I realized I had not been seeing the black shapes that I had in the house. I also realized I had never told her about them. So I shared it, and all of a sudden, we both started worrying about the girl. Nothing seemed to escalate any further, but the girl continued to be a source of worry, though we never explored any means to get rid of her. This went on for several months, and when we received a call from the property management office in Georgia, the husband of our tenant couple committed suicide in what we regarded as the kids' bathroom. Everything was handled through insurance and property management, but being a former military family, we took this news pretty hard. I didn't realize until much later, but after the tragic event, we never heard about the girl again. It was also around that time that mine and my wife's lives began to steadily improve. We did have to work hard to rebuild our relationship, and I'm still working at repairing the damage I did while I was sick, but we both agreed that it was the worst period of our life together, and it was the worst and it was my worst as an individual. And it seemed to start with and be centered around our time in that house. And again, all of my children, even the 3 that did not live there, said they experienced something. Recently, I even asked my wife if she thought the girl followed us and was trying to continue to cause us pain and suffering until the young man killed himself and was possibly seen by her as some sort of offering. It has been almost a decade since then, and no one has said anything to us about anything else happening in the house. My wife has flat out said she is never going back into that house, and we both agree that even if it is no longer haunted, it almost definitely was at some point, and also believe that if we had stayed there, our marriage would not have survived, and it terrifies me to think it would have been one of my family's lives that ended in that house.
Man.
That's tough, because we've heard about, there's a famous movie about a house that causes families to split and have issues and everything. So this is not out of the realm of possibility that some negative entity in a house could do that. Yeah.
And I know it's hard to wrap your head around this. But there's so many stories about people that are struggling with mental illness, changing their location and things getting better for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if there's a cause and effect. Say, there's some dark energy that is bringing about, the mental illness, or if the mental illness is an opening for something like this to attack.
Mm-hmm.
That maybe your defenses are down, and that's what these type of entities prey upon.
Yeah, I think you're right there.
I've read books about it. I've seen shows, that highlight this. I know to a skeptic, this sounds like you're not going to convince me that somebody that's dealing with a mental illness was somehow influenced, by an evil entity. But there's just so many of these.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's so much, so many experiences that people have had that you can't just dismiss them.
Right.
I mean, what in the world? You can say, well, they move away and things get better. It doesn't necessarily mean that changing where you live is going to make everything just get better. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. Some things may get better, but it's not going to completely cure, somebody that's dealing with mental illness. But if you take away an unseen stressor, it might. So,
right.
God, that is just, you, to me, those kind of stories are terrifying.
Yeah, they're heartbreaking too, because like you said, the person is already struggling with their mental health and everything. And we talked about it in, I think, the demonic attachments, demonic possessions, something where, yeah, there's a lot of evidence that, like you said, either mental health issues or substance abuse weakens your body and your brain and your spirit to a point where these things can take over. Mm-hmm. And, it's just taking advantage of this poor guy who is dealing with some crap in his life anyway. Mm-hmm. And then, mentally broken from the military. We know how that is for veterans coming back home anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
And then this, I don't want to say demon, but evil spirit takes advantage of that and just makes it worse. It's heartbreaking, but it sounds like it worked out for them.
Yeah. In
the end, they
got out because obviously, there was additional tragedy that happened in that house after they left.
Right. So for them, it's great that they got out and are able to move on and start the process of making things better.
Yeah.
But it is heartbreaking that stuff happens.
All right, man, that's rough.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, moving along, this next story comes from KM. And KM says they have a story from their volunteer fire department. I have a story with a volunteer fire department that I can't tell on the air. So I'll tell you later.
Involves a calendar and
a calendar.
Yeah, the volunteer firefighter calendar.
I don't know anything about that. But anyway, moving on. It says every 5 years or so, fire departments are graded by the Insurance Safety Office, or the ISO. Departments are graded on many things, and it's all about documentation. As we say, if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. Healthcare, that's exactly how it works in healthcare. About 10 years ago, I was the assistant chief of a small volunteer department. I was putting together a report for ISO inspection, and I'd been driving an hour to work at 5 a.m. and then an hour back at 3 p.m. I would then go to the office and go through 5 years' worth of paperwork. I had been doing this for nearly a week when I was about half awake and going cross-eyed from staring at paperwork. I hadn't had supper, and I heard the door open. It was around 11 p.m., and I figured it was my mom or dad coming to check on me. I yelled out and told them I was in the office. I kept working, but no one came in. So I stepped out to see where they were. No one was in the hallway. I looked out in the parking lot, and only my truck was there. I thought I was working too much, and I went back to the office to finish up what I was doing. I had no sooner sat down when I heard a loud bang in the hallway. I jumped up and ran out to see who was messing with me. The trash can that sat outside of the classroom was now on the opposite wall. A little trash was on the floor. Said for a little context, our office was part of an old school. It is said to be haunted by the last janitor. By all accounts, he was not a nice person. After he passed, people began reporting strange things in the building. Not sure if it was him or something else. I closed up everything and got out of there. I have been there at night and not felt or experienced anything. Maybe I just overstayed my welcome. Maybe so. Or
Maybe.
It's just a way to go, I'm letting you know that I'm here. You know, you know, you are not alone in this building.
Right. Right. Don't think you're by yourself. All right, Matt. So let's take a second and talk about one of our newer sponsors, Masterclass. Now, I'm a huge fan of Masterclass, and I have been for years and just got into it recently. And then they contacted us about doing some ads on the show, and both you and I were ecstatic about it because we love Masterclass. And Masterclass is a great gift for people if you want to get somebody a gift, because it's always on time and it will last a lifetime. And that's why you can't do better than Masterclass for such things. Now, some of the classes that I've been looking at and starting on Masterclass, you know, I'm big on brain health and keeping myself sharp and all that, especially as I get older. They have a class on brain health with leading experts from that field. And I think that's going to be a great one. I've gotten into the gardening with Ron Finley on there that has a class on helping you learn gardening and doing it better. And because it works for our show, Ninja, I don't know if everybody knows who Ninja is, but he's a streamer, a big time streamer. He actually has a class on there, becoming a streamer with Ninja. And I thought, you know, this is going to help out our business, not just me learning something new, but it's going to help out our business if we take that class and actually learn some stuff from him on how to become a better streamer and do more live streams.
Yep. And Masterclass makes a great gift here at the holidays. As Adam said, your loved ones can learn from the best to become their best. Masterclass is the only streaming platform where you can learn and grow with over 200 of the world's best. That's why Wirecutter calls it an invaluable gift. Get unlimited learning. Learn from any Masterclass instructor anywhere on a smartphone, computer, smart TV, or even in audio mode. And the classes really make a difference. 88% of members feel that Masterclass made a positive impact on their lives. Plus, there is no risk. Every new membership comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So get your loved ones a year of learning with Masterclass. Masterclass always has great offers during the holidays, sometimes up to as much as 50% off. Head over to masterclass.com/graveyard, that's GRAVEYARD, for the current offer.
That's right. That's up to 50% off at masterclass.com/graveyard, GRAVEYARD, masterclass.com/graveyard. All right. So my next one is from BT. It says, I have two separate stories that I experienced from the old Idaho State Penitentiary within a 12-month span that I'd like to share. I've only ever told either of these with less than a few people. First, a brief history from the old state pen, as the locals call it. Construction started in 1870 and it was open from 1872 to 1973, a total of 101 years of operation. It features 4 guard towers, and large gray stone walls were quarried by inmates from the nearby Boise foothills, specifically Table Rock, which currently overlooks the current old penitentiary with a large LED lit cross. You can even see the cross and the old pen when landing at the Boise airport, not too far from the famous blue football turf just down the road from Boise State University. Old State Pen is one of only 4 territorial prisons open before a state became a state, still open open to the public in the United States. Okay, so I finally visited the old pen in 2022 after living in Idaho since 1993 and fell in love with the site, the history, and, well, the ghost stories. I loved it so much that I volunteered for the annual Squawky and Spirits Haunted Cell Block event. So I got to cut in. Is it just this place that uses I don't know what a squawky is. What's a squawky, Matt?
I don't know.
Okay. And I thought maybe it was just me but for their annual Squawky and Spirits Haunted Cell Block event. I don't know.
I don't either.
They volunteered as a scare actor in 2023. Oh, had I kept reading. Sorry.
Of course.
Yeah, I knew I should have kept my mouth shut. And the person is sitting there screaming, "Keep reading, dummy. I tell you what it is." Squawky is what the inmates called the hooch the prisoners made from within the prison.
Oh, God. Okay.
So you have a squawky event where everybody brings in their homemade hooch,
bathtub gin, and
hey, you know what? I might be down for that.
Toilet moonshine.
That might be interesting. Taste local moonshine. I knew I should have kept reading and just kept my mouth shut. Something told me. Anyway, get back to the story. I was so excited and involved with the upcoming event that I was chosen to be the monster experiment in Cell Block 4, or 4 House, as the final scare actor to the patrons on their way back out to the prison yard. This would lead them to Cell Block 5, which was also maximum security, and where death row and the gallows were upon the prison's close in 1973. There was only one hanging in what was considered high-tech gallows at the time for the early 70s before the closure, but we'll get to that later. For Squawky and Spirits, Cell Block 4 was designated as the Haunted Infirmary, so it was clearly a hospital-type theme, hence the monster experiment. I was partnered with a, quote, bloody nurse doctor, and my costume of choice was a bloody scarecrow with a mask that had a kind of hard shell exterior, and the jaw would move and sort of talk when I opened my mouth. Very uncomfortable and painful at times, but well worth the experience. That's the way my wolf mask is.
Yeah.
Same way, so I know the pain at times. It says, anywho, in between customers, my bloody nurse doctor that I only barely had a chance to say hello to would tap her fingers in sequence on a table between us like one would do, starting from the pinky to the index finger. Tap, 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 tap. Kind of like that. Halfway through the night, it's busy and crazy and constant people coming through about every 90 seconds, and I felt the same sequenced tap twice on my hard shell exterior mask. It was clear as day, and I didn't think much of it, other than I didn't know this person and we never had a chance to talk, but I thought it was neat, added a touch.
Mm-hmm.
About 30 to 45 minutes later, I finally had a chance to ask her about tapping me on my mask, and she gave me a deer in the headlights look. She said quite decisively, "I didn't touch you. I don't know you." And that was that. But it bothers me to this day, whether or not it was paranormal or if she was just playing. I like that. I didn't touch you. I don't know you.
Yeah.
And
well,
it reminds me of Bobby from King of the Hill, where he's like,
yeah.
"I don't know you. Don't touch my purse."
Yeah.
In his self-defense course.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's kind of weird.
Yeah.
And so let's say, just for the sake of argument, she was messing with him. You do it once or twice,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't know this person. You don't do it consistently over and over and over.
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of, you give, it's a gag, you're like, "Oh, watch this. Quick. All right, I'm going to do it again."
Mm-hmm.
Then you're done, because this isn't like your buddy or anything.
Right.
You don't continuously do it with any kind of regularity,
Mm-hmm.
and I think her reaction was probably genuine.
Yeah.
Of what are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Especially if it was like being a guy wearing that mask and a girl being the one to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Is, I'm a guy, and, you start thinking, oh, well, maybe she's coming on to me or something, and so she may have immediately been like, "Hey, I didn't touch you. Don't read this the wrong way, whatever."
I'm just glad she didn't go, "I have a boyfriend." And that was all she said. And he's like, "No, that's not what but he goes on, he says, now fast forward to October, 2024. So this is recent. This is this year. He says, at this point, I have become a full-fledged member of the Idaho State Historical Society. Well, that's cool. As a benefit, I had the opportunity to join a paranormal investigation of the old pen with Big River Paranormal, a member of the Taps family. Again, that's cool. They operate in many states here in the Pacific Northwest and Canada. I joined the investigation as much of a skeptic as I could be, disprove and find alternate explanations for anything that may happen, and things happened that I could explain, but two that I couldn't. And I'll jump in again. That's the way you need to go into a paranormal investigation.
Exactly.
Disprove everything that you can so that the things you can't disprove are more legitimate.
Yep.
But he says, about a quarter through the night, we went to a place at the site known as the Cooler. Not exactly solitary, but this is where they would put inmates to literally cool them down during a heated altercation or incident. There are about 5 rooms that they would be separated into, and at this point in the evening, it was pitch black, so I volunteered to go inside one of the sequestered rooms while the rest of the group staying up front in the safe or guard area. It was pretty quiet, and after an EVP session, a joke was made about Four House sounding like, Horror's House?
Yep.
So Four's House sounding like Horror's House, and everyone laughed. At the moment of everyone's lightheartedness, I felt a clear, full hand land upon the top of my head through my baseball cap, as if to be laughing with us. So like knee slap, but right on the top of his head.
Yeah.
He said, I ran out of the holding area, and the only person stunned by what had just happened was me. It was only in hindsight that I feel like whatever was in there with me was just sharing a laugh with us.
Mm-hmm.
Next came Death Row, and this one is a doozy, so please bear with me. I'll try to be brief. When you walk into Death Row, upstairs in 5 House, You are immediately greeted by 5 death row cells on your right, followed by a doorway to your left to the gallows. On your left, upon coming upstairs, is the viewing room. It's basically one giant room separated by glass, bars in a single wall, and a rope with a floor hatch. Anyway, after our group was in the room, our lead investigators asked if anyone knew about Raymond Snowden. I immediately raised my hand, and they asked me to talk about him. Now, to set the history of Snowden, I can basically tell what I started to tell the group, but this is also when things started to happen, so please follow along with me, and I hope the history follows the experience as it happened. Raymond Snowden was not a good man. Shuffling happens outside the entry door of death row as I mention his name. 2 lead investigators get up to research the sound. He knows the Ripper of Boise or Boise Butcher. Shuffling continues, and the lead investigator literally runs outside the room toward the metal stairs that lead up to death row. She is followed by the second of only 3 investigators. As I continue to tell the story of Raymond Snowden, despite the commotion and the fact that he stabbed a woman over 30 times, slit her throat not once but twice because she kept making too many sounds, separated her spinal cord and separated specific womanly parts to consume as if it was featured on the charcuterie board, the room was left silent. After observing the drop room where Ray Snowden's hanging was, and the final execution not only at Old Penn but in the state of Idaho, we started to leave death row, and I had my girlfriend and another patron behind me, and then in the cell I was passing, which happened to be the cell next to Snowden's, a rock or pebble hit the ground so hard that you could hear it hit the ground and bounce no less than 2 or 3 times and almost skid on the concrete floor. It was so strange in the moment that as I turned and looked at the sound I heard, it took me 3 or 4 seconds to realize what had just happened before I yelled out, "What the hell?" and just pointed in the cell that the sound came from. My girlfriend and the other patron verified the same sound and the fact that it came from behind us and went away from us as if it were thrown at our direction. We determined it couldn't have fallen and it wasn't kicked from our shoes. It was definitely a creepy moment and something I could not explain. None of us that experienced it could. I'll never forget it. As a side note, it took Raymond Snowden over 11 minutes to die from his hanging because it did not go as planned and did not snap his neck for no pain.
Golly. Yeah, stuff being thrown. I don't know. Yeah, I've never had any experience like that of something being thrown.
No.
So I personally I don't want to.
No. It does fit with a lot of things we've heard that when you start talking about a ghost, they start perking up if they're there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay. These next ones come from MJS, and these are little quickies. It says, back in 2013, it was sunny in Sheffield, England. It was a Friday, and I had the house to myself for a week or so. Around 5:30 in the evening, I shut the windows in the first bedroom and in the bathroom. I left the second bedroom windows open. That's my room. So I went to bed that evening. When I got up the next morning, the windows were open in the first bedroom and in the bathroom. Like I said, I was the only person in the house. Very strange. I know I shut them because at half of 6 at night, I take my insulin shots. So I wasn't dreaming it. Huh. So open a window, it closes a window. Close a window, it opens a window.
Interesting.
And it says again, one time in 2018, I had the house to myself and I was getting in the shower. I shut the bathroom door and I heard it click shut. I got into the shower and I had the shower going. I heard the bathroom door open by itself from the outside, like someone was walking into the bathroom. She said that was like scary time. I just thought it was my granddad because he had passed away in our bathroom. Just trying to scare me. God bless him. Man, yeah, I mean, that could very well be it. Just, letting you know I'm still around.
Yeah.
Not doing anything that is tremendously frightening, but definitely something that you would know nobody else could have done this. I know what I did, and come back and find that undone. It's like when people, you set something down and you come back and it's moved and you're the only one there. You're like, there is no way. Wind didn't blow this. It's too heavy. I know what I did with it. Now, if it's me, I pick stuff up and set it down all the time and walk away from it and forget that I've moved it, and I go back to where I thought I put it and it's in a different spot. But I know myself, so I may have had a dozen of those experiences and then don't realize it. So.
Right.
Oh, they're pretty good. Those are sometimes those are just the most effective.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, those little subtle things, and you're just like, God dang. Something else is with me.
It gets the point across. All right. So this next one is from AB, and no, that's not me, and it's not Ashley. But AB nonetheless. It says, "Greetings, Graveyard. This tale is less ghost story and more eerie experience. I hike all over Ohio. For one of my adventures, I plan to hit a few different parks in southern Ohio that have shorter trails. Driving from one park to the next, I passed a sign for Hopeton Earthworks, an indigenous site on the ancient Ohio Trail that had been closed to the public for several years. Side note, southern Ohio has many protected indigenous sites which are collectively referred to as Ancient Ohio Trail. I had nothing but time to kill that day, so I did a U-turn and followed the sign to the tiny parking lot. From a bird's eye view, the bulk of Hopeton site looks like a large circle sitting on top of a large square and two smaller circles off to one side of the square. There is a short trail up an embankment to what is called an overlook, though the Hopeton site is large enough that it cannot be properly appreciated from that height. However, if you continue on the trail down to the other side of the embankment, you end up within half the site itself, just outside of the larger circle. Out of respect for the site I was stepping into, I turned off the podcast I was listening to and turned my attention to the land. I walked around the large circle, wondering about the history and events that may have taken place within. As I approached the break in the mound that allows one to enter the circles, I paused and asked for permission to enter. The answer I received was, "No, you may not." So I stood in the break and looked around the circle. The spiteful side of me wanting to enter anyway, but the empathic side continuing to be respectful to the response from the land. I continued to walk through the site to the opening of the first smaller circle. Again, I stood in the gap of the mound and asked for permission to enter. Again, the response was, "No, you may not." So again, I stood in the entrance to the circle, curious about its significance, when an unexpected sadness welled up in me, moving me with almost to tears by something I could not identify. Resuming my walk, I soon came to the opening of the third circle. I stood in the gap in the mound and I asked, "May I enter?" This time the response was, "You may." I hesitated for a moment, then took a step inside the mound. As I crossed the threshold, the sadness rose within me again, this time profound and intense. As what felt like deep sorrow overtook me, I stood in the center of that ancient circle and cried. For what exactly, I'm still not sure, but cry I did. After a few minutes of allowing myself to feel whatever the land was communicating, I took a deep breath and walked toward the opening of the circle, thanking the land for allowing me to be there and apologizing for any unintentional disrespect displayed. As I stepped out of the circle, the sadness dissipated, and I made my way to the path that led back to the parking lot. I have visited many ancient sites around Ohio, including the infamous Serpent Mound, but never before had such a profound experience. My husband suggested that I may have been so emotionally raw from the traumatic year we had just come through that I was simply more receptive to the energy of the place. Maybe, but I harbor no expectations as I continue to visit Ohio's ancient sites.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It makes you wonder about emotions that are left behind.
Mm-hmm.
And, you can experience, those feelings, but imagine if it's just compounded where
Right.
you get that feeling and you just kind of almost break down where you feel that, much like an empath, would, where you feel someone else's emotion so strong. In this case, you would be feeling, the emotions left over by that spiritual sludge, that resides there.
Yep.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
And kudos for being so respectful.
Right. Right. I thought that was cool.
I mean, I think sometimes we lose sight of that. No matter what you believe, you should always be respectful of the dead. Because, truth is we don't know.
Yep.
And, I think, there's a lot of us that want to know more, but there's no reason to not be respectful.
And respectful to the land.
Yeah, exactly.
That housed whatever ceremonies or anything that went on, because we don't officially know what went on there. Yeah. We know it was a special site, but for what? Maybe it was a pre-burial site where people were mourned.
Exactly.
And that's why she felt the overwhelming sadness. I don't know.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool. All right. This one comes from TT. It says a little backstory on me. I am ex-Navy and I have a degree in nuclear chemistry. Well, you got a lot of former military folks this year. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I have 4 siblings and my father, a Vietnam vet from 60 to 64, whom all passed away in the span of 9 years. It says, when I was stationed on my first deployment on the East Coast, my father was having pulmonary issues. I decided and got approval to go home to Washington State to give him a surprise visit during Mother's Day weekend that year. Unfortunately, he passed away as soon as my foot touched Washington State soil. To the second. He says, it gets weirder. The next night, which was Saturday, he comes to me in a dream as I sleep in my childhood bed. I see him in my dreams, and he is in his normal clothing, and he looks exactly as he did in life, sitting in his usual chair I would always find him in. He looked at me and said, I'm not going to use the name here, but he looked at it and said, yeah, tell your mom I'm sorry and happy Mother's Day for me. I told him, as I normally do, okay, will do, and he says, okay, will do. Yes, ma'am, which was a running joke between them. So I got up the next morning and treated my mom to a spectacular Mother's Day and told her what Dad told me. She then spoke out loud, "Thank you, Kay. It's okay." Since then, I'm not sure if it's PTSD or if my soul is that old, but every time my siblings passed away or someone close to me, in one case, my friend's dad, appear in my sleep, and we would talk and say parting words and look at where they'd be on the other side. Sometimes they come and visit on random nights and we spend time together. People who died violent deaths tend to appear less often. Another time, as I left the bathroom at my mother's house, a couple of years after my dad passed away, I turned off the light and opened the door. I felt like I bumped into someone and they grabbed my hand at the same time. I proceeded to say, sorry, excuse me, but then realized that no one was there. Yeah. And
that's pretty cool.
I feel this one because I've had that same experience where, somebody immediately, after passing away appears to me in a dream. I was unaware that this person had passed away. And, when you find that out, you're kind of like, it gives you a little bit of a shudder, but then you get to think, maybe that was just them reaching out, because that's exactly what happened in my case.
Yeah.
My uncle, who had been bedridden for years, I see him walking up the sidewalk and he tells me a farewell message, and I wake up from this dream for my parents to tell me that he had passed away during the night.
Yep.
So, I mean, again, we're talking about some things that are, very unusual, but we hear story after story after story from folks. Just about every year we get a story that's similar to this, where a family member has passed and then approaches them in a dream, either shortly after, or maybe right as it's happening. So,
which I love hearing those. They're great stories. All right. So this next one is from Jay. Again, another Jay, not the same Jay as before. Says, this Christmas Eve, I'd like to share a pretty scary story about my mom who passed away almost 30 years ago, but who still occasionally visits my dreams to give me needed support, advice, or less enjoyably, a scolding. They say, still dishing out that teaspoon of guilt, eh, Ma? Anyway, the first thing you should know is that she was a remarkable woman with some interesting talents. She could read a person using a regular deck of playing cards. She explained that it wasn't really the cards themselves that were special. Anything could work just as long as it got people to focus so they relaxed and dropped their barriers. I'm assuming so she could read their minds. She refused to do it for anyone close to her and never for money, so I never experienced it firsthand, but I know she did a reading for my dad, her second husband, when they first started dating. According to the story, she was able to see a dark-haired woman and two small children. When she asked about them, Dad admitted that he was in the middle of a contentious divorce and custody battle, something he had failed to mention when he first asked her out. She made strange connections with people close to her. She had a dangerous habit of lighting her cigarette by leaning down and using the burner on the gas stove, something which worried my dad greatly, and she had promised not to do. One memorable day, she misplaced her lighter, so did it once again. Within minutes, the phone rang. It was my dad, who was at work and had just had the clearest image of her breaking her promise, and he gave her the exact time she did it, which, having been staring at the stove's clock, she was forced to confess. Another example of this connection was that she and I would use it to cheat at cards. Anytime we partnered up to play pinochle against my dad and his friend, if we won the contract, she would send me the suit she wanted to be Trump, or I would concentrate on what I wanted and she would read it. This was so effective, the guys quit playing with us once they noticed what we were doing.
Oh, man.
I wish I had that ability. That would be nice. She often had prophetic dreams. One time that saved her life, and this is the scary story I wanted to tell. Mom came from a large family that often struggled to make ends meet, so as soon as she turned 18, she married a man about whom I know very little. I don't know how they met or what he did for a living, but I do know he was very troubled and that they were married for about 7 years. At first, things seemed okay, but as time passed, they started moving frequently, and then he tried to isolate her from her family. He became more and more violent and abusive, and Mom became afraid. She started having a reoccurring dream in which she was sitting at a window in a strange house talking on the phone while she watched him walk up the street towards her. A voice was telling her not to scream, but every time in the dream she did scream, and then he killed her. Naturally, these nightmares just made being asleep as bad as being awake. Things came to a head shortly after they moved to yet another new home, this one having a large picture window and a basement with both internal and external access. He came home one day from work, and he was furious. Mom never told me the details, but apparently whatever happened was bad enough that he was arrested and held without bail. A short time later, she was sitting in the living room reading when she glanced out the window and was startled to see her husband walking up the road towards the house. She immediately picked up the phone and called the police, but then recognized the scenario from the dream. As he entered the house, even though she was terrified and wanted to scream, she kept telling herself, "Don't scream. Don't scream." Instead, she pretended she was talking to her friend and having a lighthearted conversation, and used yes and no answers to tell the dispatcher what was going on. Noticing that she was on the phone, he went into the kitchen, walked back out the front door, and then seemed to leave. In the meantime, the police dispatched cars to the house, and Mom was escorted to safety. Officers began to search the house and the neighborhood, finally finding him in the cellar, hiding under the stairs with a butcher knife in his hand. He had apparently come back to kill her, but because she was on the phone to a witness, he pretended to leave, then doubled back through the backyards and entered the basement through the exterior door to wait for the opportunity to strike.
Oh my God.
The premonition of don't scream, seeing the whole thing play out,
Yeah.
how it saved her life is incredible.
That is just, it gives me cold chills, man. Ugh.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's creepy.
Yep.
Creepy. Yeah, but that weird premonition.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the time you get those things and you feel like it's nothing. It's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing. But every once in a while.
Sometimes it's something. Yeah.
All right. This next story comes from R. Okay. It says, anyway, I have a couple short ones regarding the house my grandparents. It says the same grandpa from last year's story. So R sent us a story last year as well. It says the same house my grandparents lived in when I was a boy. A brief background on the house is that it was built around 1820. It is a large farmhouse that sits on around 100 acres of pasture and forest. I could write an essay on this house and its history, but let's get to the story. The first experience happened when I was about 10 or 11. I lived nearby and spent a lot of time with my grandparents, particularly my grandfather. Well, on this day, he wasn't home, and I decided to explore the guest wing of the old rambling home. This wing consisted of a bedroom on the first floor and a steep staircase leading to a landing with another bedroom on the right and an unfinished room/attic storage space. I always felt creeped out on those stairs at night. But as it was broad daylight, I decided to go up there and check stuff out. I went into the attic space on the left and began looking in old boxes of stuff. I found some neat items, such as my dad's old skiing trophies and other odds and ends from my grandparents' history together. I was in that room for maybe 15 minutes and everything seemed fine. But even though it was a warm day out and the attic had been sweltering, I began to feel a cold draft in the room. My body erupted in goose flesh, and I started to feel as if I was being watched. I slowly picked my way back towards the door out of there, and as I did, it felt as if the temperature continued to drop. I reached the door and went through it in a bit of a rush, but as I did, I looked back over my shoulder, and in the far corner, not far from where I had been rummaging around, stood a woman in what I now know as period dress from sometime in the 1800s. She was translucent and didn't move, but she was looking right at me. I panicked and nearly broke my neck going down those stairs. That was the last time I ever went up them, ever. Another time when I was around 14 or so, I was down in the basement with my grandfather. We were in a portion that had been used as a root cellar way back. I was helping him jack up the back corner of the house as it still sat on its old stonework foundation. The footings needed to be replaced, so we had to jack up the corner to replace them. Said we had been down there for quite a while, and it was pitch black except for a spotlight and a Coleman lantern. We were at the wall, shimming up a section when something moved in between us and the spotlight. Neither of us saw what moved, but a flickering shadow had been cast by the light. We both turned to see if someone had come down. No one was there. We went back to work, and a couple minutes later, it happened again. This time, we both felt air move behind us, and we spun around again. My grandfather then grumbled something inappropriate and walked over to the spotlight. He picked it up, shook it to see if it was flickering. It wasn't. He panned it around the space we were in, and standing in the opposite corner from me was a tall black form in the shape of a man. We both froze where we stood. My grandfather grabbed the nearest thing to him and began to stalk toward it in a fighting crouch.
Get him, Grandpa.
Yeah. As he neared it, he swung the crowbar and it whistled right through the entity, which promptly disappeared. He then grabbed me and pushed me behind him as we quickly moved out of that space and made for the stairs up to the house. Afterward, we didn't really talk about it as we caught our breath. We simply stood in the dining room for a minute and looked at each other. He sort of shook himself and then decided the work could wait for another day. We spent the rest of the afternoon playing cribbage, doing other chores outside, and of course his favorite pastime, annoying my grandma. Oh, man. See, now, a story like this is really cool because it was between two people, and at the same time, you're seeing the same thing and reacting to it. So it makes it valid between the two of you. When you know another person saw the same thing you did and had a similar reaction, then it maybe even it's a little bit more scary because it makes it that much more real.
Yeah.
So I'm not seeing things,
not my imagination.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I've got somebody with me that experiences the same thing, you're kind of like, okay, yeah, we just saw what we saw, and that was pretty crazy. But yeah, I mean, those old houses with those cellars and stuff. Oh man, I won't go in them.
Yeah, no, they freak me out.
I'm telling you, I went with my parents. This was not too long ago. This was maybe in the last couple of years. My parents loved to go to estate sales. And I went with them to a house, and we're milling around looking at stuff, and they said, there's more stuff downstairs. I was like, oh, okay, I'll go look and see what's downstairs. I mean, I knew when I'm going down that stairway, I mean, it's steep. It's almost like a ladder.
Yeah.
and it's real narrow. And I'm not going to like this at all. And I got down there, and I mean, you're looking at stone foundation, you know, and you're standing there knowing that from every side you're underground.
Right.
And I was just like, nope, there's nothing down here I want to look at that bad. This makes it just made me feel weird. It creeped me out. So I get it.
Yep. All right. So what we're going to do, we've got quite a few more stories left, but as we do the past several years, we're going to split them up. So the next bit of stories, if you didn't hear your story and you know you sent one in, don't worry, it's getting told. You'll just be next episode so that we don't push too long tonight, because we could do 2 or 3 hours, and we don't like to push our episodes that long. But
yeah, and we want to give everybody a fair shake. We don't want to rush through them.
Exactly. But what I want to do now is that little surprise that I mentioned, Matt.
Hot dog.
Okay. So
I like surprises.
Well, we're going to start this surprise out with a little sadness, but then we're going to get into the cool part. As many of you guys know, our good friend, longtime friend of the show, Jerry Pauly, passed away on Thanksgiving of this year. Now, he was the first podcaster that ever reached out to me and Matt.
Yeah.
And he gave us pointers. He helped out the show. You know, he helped me and Matt out in Graveyard Tales. And he was always there if we needed him. We could message him and he would get back to us, you know, advice, or if you knew Jerry, he would get back to you with smartassery, which was very much appreciated. We did our first ever live show with him and Tracy at Hale Nashville. If you've got pictures from that, I still am trying to find those pictures, but post them in the group if you want, or send them to us. But I know he did so much more for so many other people, and I know he's definitely going to be missed by a ton of people. I know Matt and I are going to miss him, but some of his good friends down here in Texas with me have had some experiences since his passing that I wanted to tell you about.
Oh, wow.
So I asked them to send me the experiences because I saw them talking about it on Facebook, and I said, guys, can you send me your stories, your experiences, because I feel like this would be a great tribute to Jerry and to everybody that knew him, still loves him, and you know, for Tracy too. So I'll just say this now. Don't stop listening to Hillbilly Horror Stories. Go keep listening. Buy merch. You're helping Tracy out a lot. But anyway, if you're in our group, you probably know these people, at least in seeing their names. But the first one is Tim Mullins.
Mm-hmm.
So Tim Mullins lives down here, and we have known Tim for several years. But he says, first, let me say that myself and 41 Studio Productions will miss Jerry dearly. Like so many other podcasts, 41 Studio Productions got its start because of Jerry. Back then, we were known as Triple H Media, and that's when Matt and I worked with him, was Triple H Media. And Jerry had the Hillbilly Horror House at the end of his episodes for a while. So without Jerry, I wouldn't be doing what I love. But he says on Sunday, December 1st, just a few days after Jerry had passed away, I was texting and talking with his wife, Tracy. I was in my work truck driving to a job site. I pulled up and we ended the conversation. Well, I opened my door and I was about to step out when I looked down. He says, I had to. It was a Walmart parking lot, and there's no saying what you're about to step into. Might be gum or someone's discarded drink. If you're having a real good day, it's probably somebody's used baby diaper. So he said, taking precaution before I stepped out, I looked down and I see a shiny new dime. He says, this thing was clean and looked nearly brand new. And you may be saying, big deal, you found a dime. Well, if you knew Jerry and listened to his podcast, you would know that he was always fascinated with stories of loved ones receiving dimes from someone who had passed away. So why wouldn't it be from Jerry? He said, yeah, it could just be a dime that someone dropped, but what if it wasn't? He loved the idea of doing it when he passed on and believed that, and I believe this is what he's doing now. What's more strange is that when I went to post this on the Hillbilly Horror Stories Facebook page, I saw where another friend of Jerry's posted that he had found a dime as well just an hour before me. So thank you, Jerry. Message received. Miss you, brother.
Man, that is incredible.
Yep.
Dadgum.
Yep.
For something that was really, that was Jerry's thing, and that is crazy.
Yep. You want more? Brett from the Evil Never Dies podcast, another friend of Jerry's, another friend of ours. He says, yesterday I was putting up my neighbor's Christmas lights. It was a beautiful December 1st in North Texas, 4 days after our very good friend Jerry Pauly tragically passed away. As I was unboxing some Christmas lights, the breeze picked up and blew some leaves across the pavement. I just happened to look down, and there was a shiny dime. I knew right then it was from Jerry. Just 2 weeks prior on the Hillbilly Horror Stories podcast, at the beginning of the show, he shared that his neighbor had passed and the subject of finding dimes came up. He says, I turned off my truck, opened the door to get out, and, I skipped a line. He said the subject of finding dimes came up. At that moment, I was pulling up to the gas pump while he was listening to this podcast. He turned off the truck and opened the door to get out, and boom, first thing I see is a dime. I immediately messaged Jerry, and he said how cool that was. The next message back was, make sure you claim that on your taxes. The Jerry Pauly smartassery. Thanks, Jerry. You will be missed. Rest easy, my friend. When I saw this posted, one other person got to their job, another good friend of Jerry, got to their job, walked behind the counter, and at a cashless business found a single dime in their spot.
That is unbelievable.
If you're a good friend of Jerry's, keep an eye out for a brand new dime. Jerry seems to be saying, hey, I'm gone, but I'm still with you guys.
Yeah.
And I wanted to share these stories on our Listener Stories episode as a tribute to Jerry, because I know I'm going to miss him. I know Matt's going to miss him, and a lot of other people will. And I couldn't think of what to do or what to say for our good friend Jerry. But then all of this started happening. So it's like Jerry wrote his own story for this episode.
Yeah. Yeah. We are going to miss Jerry, and Adam's right. When we were starting out, Jerry helped us tremendously. I honestly don't know if Adam and I would be in the position we are today without Jerry. I mean, that's just a fact.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to miss him. So what a fantastic tribute.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was really cool that people are still experiencing Mr. Jerry Pauly.
Yep.
So, but like I said, if you send in a story and haven't heard it yet, don't worry. We hadn't forgot about you.
That's right.
We're just going to get to it next week.
Yep. So until next time, we'll save you a seat in the graveyard.
See you soon.